Hi, this is Lisa Hutt. I'm a consultant with Banger along with Aaron Lawler. And today we're going to be talking about various ways that you can record your labor costs into Sage and along with the various ways that you can bill those labor costs as well. So Aaron is going to talk about one of the most common ways, and then I'm going to jump into a couple other new ways that we are recording labor in job cost and billing module. So Aaron, take it away.
Okay. So for job labor, there's a couple of things to think about. And one is how much detail you want to send to job cost. And the second one is what costs actually get sent. So I'm going to focus on actual costs, and then Lisa will have some other options. So for the detail, let's just look at the detail first. Oh, I need to look at my other screen here. So for the detail, if you go into payroll and then file, company settings, and PR settings, then you can see the JC entry settings button here. And so there's a note here. It says that payroll automatically summarizes job cost entries by job, extra, cost code, and category. And those are entered at the time that you enter your time entries, with the exception of category, usually, because that is usually set up on the pays. But so that's the least detail that it sends. If you want it to send more detail, you can check these boxes. And that just really depends on how much information you want to have in job costs, because payroll records the detail of everything and you can always get to it later. But you may want, for privacy reasons or for your employees and also for the owners of projects, you may not want to send more detail. I generally don't check any of these boxes, but it just depends on your situation and what kind of information is required. So that's the detail part of what gets sent to job cost. Then the cost type, like what are the costs that get sent? And the costs that get sent are pays, fringes, and taxes. And fringes and taxes combined are considered burden. So let's start with pays and how job cost entries are created for pays. The first thing to think about is on your pay. There's a section here for distribute to, and if you want that cost to go to job costs, you need to make sure the job cost checkbox is checked. And then the next thing is here for pays. While we're on pays, you can determine in advance. I'm just going to list and look at what my other pays are. So you can determine in advance what job cost category you want your pay to be sent to. Labor is just the most common. And then just as a note, this top entry for expense account, that is only for non-job related payroll costs and the job cost. And then if it is job related, payroll will look at the job cost setup to see what financial account to charge things to. But for job costs, the category here. Now, as a note, the default detail is job, extra, cost code, and category. So payroll will summarize those entries and send them to job cost. If you wanted to send the pay ID, you can set up a separate pay ID for the entries, and then the pay ID will get sent too, and it will create separate entries for every pay ID. The same for category, but for categories, if you use a different category for different pays, like let's look at overtime here, because I believe the sample data has overtime. Let's see, OT. And in the sample data, their example has a separate category, but that means it's going to create a separate entry in job cost. So if you don't want overtime to be a separate entry in job cost, you would just make this category L as well, the same as the regular pay. Then it will summarize it. So that's pays, and that's the actual. So that will send your actual pays over to job costs. One other item to think about is accruals. So if you have vacation pay or sick pay accruals that you're going to pay your employees, I always like to send those costs to job cost as they're earned rather than as they're taken, so that the job actually gets burdened with each entry as it's earned rather than just as it's paid. So I would set up accruals for those items, an accrual pay, and then you need a formula. That's kind of beyond the scope of this meeting, but you would need a formula to calculate those for you. But I think that that's a really good idea to do, and I would recommend accrual pays. So the next thing is fringes. So fringes are paid to someone else. They're not paid directly to the employee, but the cost of the fringes is part of burden and it goes to job costs. So again, you have this section here, whether you want to send the entry to these modules, if you have them, and if you want to send them. So you would want job cost checked if you want to send it. The expense account, again, is only for non-job items. Liability account is where it's important to set up, because you will need to send that entry somewhere. So on fringes and also on taxes, if you want the burden amount to go to a separate entry and to a separate category or cost code, you can set those up here. If you leave these blank, it will use whatever cost code and category the pay entry has. So that's important to know. So that's fringes. And yes, cancel. And then taxes. Taxes are similar. So you'd go to set up taxes, tax rates. And I just like to look at the employer because that's the cost. So you can't, if you want to just see specific kinds of taxes in your list, you can set a condition. And I'm going to set that to say, I only want to see taxes where the employer tax box is checked. So now I can say okay and okay, and click next, and it will only show me the employer taxes. You see this box here and how they're set up. So again, we have distribute to job cost checked. If we wanted this to be sent to a separate category or cost code from the regular pay entry, then we would make an entry here. Otherwise, you can leave it blank. So let's just do a list. So here are, the list doesn't get limited by the conditions you set, but if you just click the next button, then it will only show next or previous. It will only show you what you set the condition for. So let me just check my list. I think that is about all. So on time entry, let's just look at, I'm just going to do an enter checks here, and we'll do standard. So we'll show the job. Old dates for the sample data. Okay, so, oh, I had an entry already for that employee, so I'm going to cancel that check and do. Okay. So what comes up in this, in the entry screen, and this comes up for enter time and also enter checks, but so the job, the cost code, it does not have category because the best practice is to set up the category on the pay, but you can add a field here for the category if you want to. This form doesn't have it. But so job cost code, you enter that. Then as fringes and taxes are calculated, for every one of these combinations of job cost code and category, it will allocate your burden to those entries. So automatically, so you don't have to allocate that manually. And then it will send it to the job. So that is all I have on that. So just to recap, you want to think about how much detail you want to send to job cost, and then how you want to set up your pays, your fringes, and your taxes based on the detail that you want to send. That is all that I have for that subject. So over to you, Lisa.
Thank you. So what Erin has covered is kind of some general setup on labor, but the method that the 3 different methods you can do with labor costing related to how it hits your job cost reports and related to how you're going to bill those job costs are what I'm going to cover. So the very first scenario you can see here, the method number 1, you're going to record your actual labor costs to your jobs, and you're going to bill those actual labor costs to the owners. So in the setup Erin was going through, if you keep the check boxes on to where your labor and your payroll taxes and any labor accruals, if all of those check marks are left on to send it to billing and to send those costs to job cost, that is what will happen. So if you don't use rate tables, you don't use any other methods beyond recording payroll in the payroll module and the time processing it and keeping those check boxes on, your actual labor costs will go over to your job cost module. When you set up your fringes in the payroll module, you can set up work comp and your insurance and really any other automatic accrual you might want to have based on maybe hours or a percentage of payroll, for example. You can set up like your work comp tables as well in scenario number 1, method number 1. So there are still some automatic things that can happen with this simplified method. You can also do like, if I just want to add 15% on top of my gross labor, my gross payroll. A lot of companies contract their agreements with owners that way. So I just want to go into fringes and add an automatic 15% fringe accrual. That can also still be done. So I just want to let you know, like method 1 isn't just labor and payroll taxes. You can do some automatic things and tables with that as well, and calculations. Okay. So that is the most common method that's being used right now across many of our clients and across the accounting industry, the most common thing we've seen. The problem that some people are running into is that their billable rates that they've contracted with an owner are higher or are set rate, and your actual labor costs are not that rate because they fluctuate based on payroll taxes, benefits, if you give someone a raise or a bonus, things like that. So what some companies are running into are that you need to charge the owner of your project $60 an hour, let's say, for a laborer or a carpenter. Or really, you can set many different parameters and ways to do it. But That is something that Sage can handle. You just have to know how to properly set it up. And I'm going to go through the possibilities in Sage. I'm not going to go through technically how to do it. I will show you some screens, but I want to share with you some of the methods you can put in place. So this method number 2 is you're going to record the actual labor costs to the job, to the, in this example, we're using 22001 for the job number, but we're going to bill out at a standard rate per hour. So in the system, would have to go into the rate tables and tell it, let's say John Smith's a carpenter. I'm using John Smith here. John Smith is a carpenter, and based on his title or his division, I mean, there's different things we can do. You can tell the system to look at his hours on that job and bump it up to $60 an hour when it's billed out. So this would be a time and material or a cost plus type of job scenario. Okay, so this for Sage 300, it really doesn't work too well with progress billing or AIA billings. So this is more of a time and material cost plus scenario. So you're going to still process payroll like you would in method 1. You're still going to push all the costs through to the job. And when you set up the contract in Sage so that you can bill this project, you will assign a rate table to that particular job. When you do that, you have to tell it, hey, look at the title of my employees, and all carpenters are going to be given the $60 an hour labor rate to bill to the owner. Okay. So we'll just assume we're going off title for this guy. So on the rate table in Sage, which I'll show you here where those are, it's not the exact scenario, but this is example of like a table. Okay. So you would assign, you would use the title instead of these up here, but you would have it queue off of the type carpenter here, and you'd put their price. Okay, so you'd set up a separate table for this job and assign it to that on the contract. Okay, so when you generate the bill inside the billing module using generate cost-based invoices, it then takes the hours from John Smith, says, okay, he had 40 hours, and does it at $60 an hour. Okay. So your cost reports will show like this. This is what'll hit your job cost report. And this is what the bill is going to generate at. Now you don't have to do anything if the setup is done for the rate tables. So this will do it on its own. Okay. So the benefit of doing this is you can see your actual labor costs by job. You can see the actual amount you billed the customer for labor at the $60 an hour, and you can compare the two. So for this particular cost code on this job, I know that my cost actually for John Smith, what he cost me as the company, is $1,554, but I billed him out at $2,400. Okay. So you can run a report to get that information. That's the benefit of method number 2. The disadvantage is if you estimate and you do your budget based on the billable rate to the customer, the $60 an hour. So you're estimating it at this dollar amount. If you record this as your actuals, you're going to be under. And, you know, when you're trying to manage a project and you're looking at costs and remaining costs, yeah, you could compare hours and see where you're at, but your costs are always going to be off compared to what you've estimated. Okay, so that's the disadvantage. Also, any employees that have access to the job cost module and job cost reports could see what this guy is getting paid. So if you employ this method, it hides this scenario. So those are the two big disadvantages or disadvantages. I don't know how big they are. Some people share what their carpenters and project managers make, and it's not a big deal to them, but sometimes this confidentiality comes into play. Okay. So you have to decide, do you like being able to see the labor versus the what was billed out, the actuals versus what was billed? That's an advantage to this. Or do you want to match up to your estimate more? So method number 3 is kind of a hybrid of two, but you will be able to match up to your budget and your cost estimate a little easier. There is some more work with this, but it's not extremely cumbersome. There are some imports you will have to do in addition to any of the other two methods, but it gives you a little more clear picture of what I estimated versus what actually happened. Okay, so this scenario, we're going to record the standard billable rate, so $60 an hour, as my cost, and I'm going to bill it out at $60 an hour. Okay, so the advantage to this is, like I said, you estimate your labor at $60 an hour on your budget, you bill it out, or you cost it that way as well in the system. So when you run a cost report, if they worked exactly the same number of hours versus what you budgeted, then you're going to, have a zero difference. The disadvantage to this is you've got to do this third step down here, which I'll get into in a second. Okay, so number 1, the payroll is still has to be done. The guy still has to be paid. John Smith still needs to get his money. However, instead of using the real job, I'll call it 22001 is the customer job, we're going to put it to this kind of internal job. So a lot of companies are doing, some companies are doing this, and they'll call it carpenter's labor. So all of the carpenters will go to this job when payroll's processed, not the actual job they're working on. Okay. So all of those actual costs will go into this job instead of like up here to that real job. Okay. Then when you bill, it's still billed out at the $60 an hour. So that hasn't changed. But when you record the job cost, you're going to record the job cost so it hits your job cost reports at the $60 an hour to the real job. The offset, you always have to have two sides. The offset will be to this internal carpenter's job. So this $2,400 is kind of like revenue because you're billing it to the real job. So it's kind of like revenue. And the costs here, what actually cost the company to pay John Smith, you made $846 on this guy on this job. So in this, at the end of the day, on this one payroll, what will be sitting in this job as a cost will actually be negative $846. So that at the end of the month, when you run your WIP report, if you're doing percent completion, then you zero this out and take it in as income into your company. So every month you have to do that. You have to you'll have to import or enter this in, and then you clear that out in your WIP report. So there is an import file that has been created that will do this for you. So what some companies we have employed this with, they have created a payroll time import. So to import their time, so their 40 hours for John Smith, it's in an Excel file. So all their employees are listed, all their hours, and how they want it coded. Then on that same file, this entry is also it's also on there as well. So you will have to import time into payroll. Job cost module and do an import as well. The Excel file gives you the information, and it's kind of like a template. Whatever time record keeping system you have, you'll take that data out of there, plunk the time by employee in, and the rest is done here. The gist of it. So if this is something that your company is interested in, the file, we would go through that with you. We would show you how it works. And we would also walk through what is the best case for you, method 1, method 2, or method 3. So more and more people are gravitating to this because you are getting your estimates more in line with what actually is happening. And the customers are wanting backup of their labor and what you build. So they want to see the $60 an hour match the billing. They don't necessarily want this, and you shouldn't give that out unless it's asked. I mean, they want to see they want backup for what you've built. Okay. So this method is being used quite frequently. If it's known, people are liking this. So I would say reach out if any of these methods besides number 1, this is pretty standard. Reach out, let us know. We can walk you through it. Also, just setting up, payroll in general. I mean, sometimes you need help with that. The payroll module is pretty complex, especially if you have unions. We do have more, and we'll have more live streams regarding more payroll and labor. But that is basically the gist of this live stream, was covering the different methods that you could do with labor and how you build that out. Erin, do you have anything you want to add to that maybe you've seen or that I didn't touch on?
No, I just wanted to emphasize that in that scenario number 3, they would turn off in that distribution section of the pays and burden, the fringes, pays, fringes, and taxes. They would uncheck that JC checkbox.
Yeah, so that has been a question I've gotten from an accounting standpoint. When they are audited, a lot of auditors will look at, okay, what does my job cost report show, or my WIP report? And what are my general ledger accounts showing? And they'll try to reconcile my labor general ledger account to the job cost report. So if we turn off the job cost distribution, that doesn't tie. So
I see.
Yeah.
So it's just the pass-through job that it sends it to.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay.
It's 22999. Now, if when we walk through this with clients, there is that possibility. You can turn it off, and there are reasons you would, but I'd say the majority of the time, if you're audited or reviewed, or you want to keep your general ledger, close to your job cost reports, you won't want to turn that off. But there are times you do. And that is something we would walk you through when we go through these scenarios, the clients. But yeah, I know what you're saying, because it would make it easier if you just turned it off to not hit the job, but then the auditors have issues with that at the end of the day.
Good point.
But yeah, that's a good thing to bring up. Okay, anything else you can think of, Erin?
Nothing for this, no.
Okay, so if no one has any questions, go ahead and contact us if you have any questions. Thanks for watching, and we will see you some other time. Thank you.